we are to have Johanna Ogden, a distinguished historian based in Portland, Oregon in America. Okay. Johanna has done invaluable research work on the lives and struggles of the early South Asian Punjabi community in America. Her research concentrated on the birth and importance of the Ghadar Party in the early 20th century in America, whose members sacrificed their all, not only fighting for the independence of India, but they also fought for the innate rights of the immigrant workers here in America. Please welcome Johanna.
Thank you for having me, and I'm sorry to make this meeting go in English. I have no language skills. So.
Yeah, okay, fine.
I will just quickly add, it is important to hear Johanna simply because Ghadar movement, however important movement and historic importance it has, it still has some misgivings about it. Many people, there are two main ones. One is that many people think that the Ghadar Party was born in California. Number two, the perception is that the Ghadar Party was the brainchild of Har Dayal, Lala Har Dayal, who was an intellectual. So that is the issue here for the people to know that Ghadar Party wasn't born here in California. It came to California, but Johanna will go into the detail of it. And Har Dayal, Lala Har Dayal, although he was intellectual, he made a great contribution to it, but he was not the Ghadar Party. He was not the one who invented Ghadar Party. The wheel was invented on the sawmills, the lumber mills of Columbia River. And Johanna, since you have done a lot of work on this one, so I will give you the floor now. You please begin what you want to say.
Bashar, I apologize, my video was on earlier and it's not cooperating now. I can give you a brief overview of what my research has been, or just give me some parameters of what would be helpful for me to talk about here.
Yeah, I think you go from the beginning of the Ghadar Party, how the seed was born and where the whole thing started, which bloomed into such a incredible organization.
Okay, so I've been researching this for now too many years, probably 12 years at this point, and I started with finding evidence of two articles, if anybody wants to read them, in the Oregon Historical Quarterly. They're available online. If you Google my name, again, it's the Oregon Historical Quarterly. There's one about the founding, a more overview article about Astoria, which is where the party was founded in 1913. And in 2013, hosted a 3-day commemoration of the foundings of Ghadar there in Astoria that the city backed. Bashara was a part of it, along with many other people from the West Coast.
Okay.
My research since that first article has also kind of stepped back a few steps to see the founding was in Astoria, and the founding convention was in the Finnish Socialist Hall. Har Dayal was there. There were big parades in the city. People, people came from all over the West, including Canada, California, all over. But I believe that the beginnings, the organizational beginnings, happened closer to Portland, in a little town that's now a part of Portland called St. John's. And in 1910, there was a riot there, as I'm sure a number of people here are familiar with, much like the Bellingham riots, the Vancouver riots, the anti-Asian, and in this case, specifically anti, as they were called at the time, Hindu riot in 1910, just outside of Portland in this town of St. John's. This is where Bashar's Sohan Singh Bakna lived. He was working in the mills there. Most of the people here most of the Punjabis here in Oregon were mill workers along the Columbia River. And after this riot, it was, first of all, the first time that there was a prosecution by the state of the rioters. I think that was because of two things. One, there was a particular kind of racial policy here in Oregon. It was still very much a racist policy, but was one that was trying to keep laborers. So it was an anti-violence policy, but also people like Swan Singh Bucknah and others pressured the British consulate and others to intervene on their behalf. And over 2 years' time, there were trials here of the rioters, including the mayor of the town, various officials. And out of that, while there was very little in the way of actual, there were a couple of convictions, mainly of laborers who were, on the one hand, the main bulk of the people that carried out the riot, but I think they were directed by the more powerful forces in St. John, some of the lumber company owners, the mayors, that kind of thing. But after the trials, shortly after, at the house of Kanchi Ram, who also lived here in St. John's, they called a meeting and they started a study group after the riot, and we're trying to deal with, why are we so hated everywhere we go? And at a certain point, they decided that it had to do with the fact that they were considered, quote unquote, slaves, as they were called, slaves of the British, and they were not respected anywhere, and that to change their position, they had to challenge the British in a fundamental way. And they invited Lala Har Dayal up from San Francisco to come address them, to talk to them. It took him 6 months to get up here, and he was not the only one that underestimated what was happening here in Oregon. I've had an opportunity to read some of the British surveillance records. They didn't think anything of significance was happening here in Oregon. And I think that was primarily because there were laborers here. There were a few students, but there were very few prominent intellectuals. And so a lot of people just underestimated, like, what could laborers do? But it was once Har Dayal came up, which was in about March or April of 1913, then they held a meeting in Kanchi Ram's home in this little town outside of Portland, and decided that the only way forward was to challenge the British.
Can we continue, Pashara Singh ji?
Yeah. Yes.
No.
Yeah. I think what Jahana is basically saying is that the Ghadar Party, although it was formally formed in 1913, but she is telling you the pre-runner of this, how it happened. And it was the two race riots. That was the one which happened in Bellingham in 1907. And the second one on the same way happened in St. John's. That was in 1910. And in both these, the mill workers were very badly treated and racially assaulted. And from Bellingham, they actually never went back there. They ran, they left their jobs and all that, and they came to Oregon. But when the same thing happened in St. John's, then they stood there, they decided to stand their ground. And that is when they started to organize the mill workers and all that kind of thing. And it was a legwork which was done by Swan Singh Bucknah. And then the meeting was, formal meeting was, and there were a lot of little organizations up and down, naming Indian, societies, cultural societies and this and that. They invited all of them, and they invited Lala Har Dayal also, who was at in LA at that time. And Kartar Singh Sarabha, I believe, also joined that meeting. So the seeds were sown, and they had been, sprouting, were lying in that ground for all these years. And these people did that legwork and organized that meeting in 1913 when the formal Ghadar Party was formed, where Swan Singh Bucknah was elected president and Lala Har Dayal was the general secretary, and Pandit Kanshiram was the cashier. And then for strategic reasons, they moved to San Francisco. Now the question is that I think the best thing what we can do is, unfortunately, there has been bad connections on videos and audios and all that kind of thing. What we can do is, Johanna has made some remarkable suggestions that how their history can be, set right here in America. And she has already done it, and the Consul General of India is working on it. They have already approved or accepted, most of their findings. And the Ghadar Memorial is they are renovating it, and there will be a reference library, and there will be everything, and all this history will be put straight there. What I suggest is that we take these suggestions which Johanna has done, and as Mr. Sekhon has said, that they are going to view the Ghadar party's role afresh in Punjab, and all the other martyrs who played a great role in the independence of India, and set the record straight of Indian history there also. So I think the question is how these two isolated pockets can work together and share their research and share their experience, and how do they exchange their scholars. From here they can go there, and from the Punjab government they can come here and visit all those things which Johanna has dug up. And this is how we can build, the real image of what the Ghadar party was. So in the end, I would suggest to the panel that having done this with this meeting, I will summarize the suggestions made by Johanna, and we could make a proclamation or a resolution on behalf of the NRI Press Club, and then we will send it to Mr. Sekhon there. He can take it up with the government from there, and how they can liaise with each other. Yes. Johanna, any question? She is there, I think.
Yeah.
Hi, Johanna.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I have a question. Was there any other, because there are a lot of socialist movements, activity going on in the world, like Lenin in Russia, was any influence of those socialists like Marx and Engels in England, their own works and like that? Was there any influence of all these forces, socialist movements going on in the world on this Ghadar movement?
Absolutely, 100%, absolutely. And for example, the founding of the Ghadar movement in Oregon was done in the Finnish Socialist Hall. So, and that was for a reason, right? And I just talked to Bashar about a book I read recently about, it was coinciding with the Mexican Revolution. That was, much of it was also a cross-border revolution that they organized in the US and, went into Mexico. And there were a lot of, Kanko J had a lot of, who was a part of Ghadar, had a lot of relations with the Mexican radicals too. So the Chinese, Sun Yat-sen's forces were operating all throughout the West Coast. And they definitely, there was all that interaction. And I think that's one of the things that if there was more government to government funding of some of the translations and cooperative work, that's a really rich archive to be able to get a much deeper understanding of how these organizations work together. I guess the other one I would add is the Wobblies, the Industrial Workers of the World. And their Mohan Singh Bucknell was a member of that. They worked. So there was a lot of cross-fertilization. And I think that's it's a really under-researched element of these kinds of movements. And because if you think about the US at that time, it was sort of the ground zero for immigration because of the massive industrial projects that were going on. So they were just drawing millions of people in, and most of those were laborers. And for many reasons, both the same as for the Indians that were here, they were motivated by what was going on in their home country and also what was going on here in the US, North America.
Let me add also, I think Professor Gupta has an excellent question. there. And the article which I read, her research article, Jahana's research article, on which the government of Astoria, the local government of Astoria, the mayor and the city council, they honored the Ghadar party because it was born in their city 100 years ago. So in 2013, they recognized those people and the place where the meeting took place, and they dedicated a plaque there. And I read in that article, the part answer to Gupta's question is that was those movements happening in the rest of the world influenced them? That was the reason why they moved their headquarters from Oregon to
Yeah,
San Francisco.
exactly.
That is where all these activists' links were, or their headquarters were, and they had been liaising very closely. This is what I learned from Johanna's article. So what I will suggest is that I will ask Johanna to send me all her links, which I will then circulate with the members of the panel, and you can read it and get informed. And the next meeting we have, that will be more educated meeting.
Very good.
Last question, Gary, is for your information. I have a question for Jonah. There were organizations working at the time of socialist events happening in the world, because it was a medieval period, industrialization did not happen. Is there any mention of this movement, Sonse Bakhna group, in that international workers meeting where they gave a slogan, "Workers of the World Unite"? Some linkages.
I honestly don't know, but I do know that some of the Ghadris later in life went to the Soviet Union, for example, and were a part of that. So I think if you look across movements in various parts of the world, including in India, you'll find a lot of the seeds. I just wanted to make one mention of how this story has changed here in Oregon, the story about both, early Punjabi settlers here, but in particular Ghadar. It's become a known story, from a story that nobody knew in the last 10 or 12 years. It's in the state capitol, where the panels inside the rotunda, the state capitol, telling some of the history of the state now includes this story. It's included in historical exhibits in the main historical organization. People reference it when they're talking about other movements. Other historians of other communities cross-reference this work. So I think that people are very open right now in the US, I think, to trying to diversify history. I think it's a great time to try to push this into the schools, and I also think some joint projects across in India and the US and Canada to be able to better document some of the people involved. It's an excellent time to be doing that. And I would think that using the prestige of the government in Punjab to help push those initiatives would be really helpful.
Thank you. Peshawar Singh ji, close karo.
Yes, I think it's very interesting. After Johanna brought her research paper, and the city of Astoria and the mayor and the city council recognized that, they went and surveyed those sites and all those places which have been mentioned, and they dug up the old newspapers, old record. As Professor Gupta was asking, is there any mention of this movement going on? Yes, she dug up all those things in the old papers and all that kind of thing in the libraries around the area. And then that proclamation which is inscribed on that plaque, I will send you the copy of that plaque, because I went there and I attended that 100th anniversary of the Ghadar Memorial, which the local city government honored them. And they gave me the original copy of that. When I brought it back to California, we presented it to about a dozen different cities here in California, and the city councils and the mayors of all those cities read those, recognized those, and they issued their own proclamation. And a copy was handed to the Consul General of India. He has the copy also, and that is also now in the library of in the Ghadar Memorial. If you go to the Ghadar Memorial, where it all happened, where those people actually worked, you can go there. When you feel it, you enter that place, you can still feel as if those people are around. So there's a lot of work, as I'm saying, digging up the roots of this, going to the roots of this movement here. But there is not enough in India. People in India, where this movement actually belongs, ultimately, don't know much. So that is what I am saying, that whatever has been dug up here, and what those people are going to do in Punjab, that can help each other in establishing the right history, which can go into the school books. Because it is better to read, not to read any history rather than reading a wrong history. So when you talk about adding the history, importance of history in schools, you make sure that it is the right history, it's the true history. It is not the fake history which goes to the people, to the young minds.
Thank
And
you.
I also think, just real quickly, I think it's an inspiring story. We're all living in such difficult times right now, wherever we are. And I think the history of the people that founded Ghadar against all odds is a very inspiring story. And I think it's really of our times. So.
Okay. Peshawar Singh ji,
It's what Jana means to say is, it is more relevant now than it was then, although we were slaves at that time. But the problem which the world sees, world watches in front of it, is not less than what we had, where those people had to rise and sacrifice their all. So I think this moment in time also need that kind of movements, that kind of people who have that kind of leadership and can, sacrifice their all as those people did.
Johanna ji, thank you very much. Peshawar Singh ji, let me close now here. That's good. Thank you.
I would hastily say Gary ji, that for the information of all the panel members, if they agree, then we write a resolution stating all those things which need to be done there, and how these two people can cooperate, the government of the people here in America, and because there are a lot of local governments which are on that page, and how to spread this message into Punjab and then the rest of India, and how these people can benefit from each other's research and what they want to do. Because we want to do it and to get it into the curriculum here. It is already, testimonies have been given to the State Board of Education in California, so that they have written it, they have included it, but more needs to be written about the Ghadar movement. And the same these people want to do in Punjab also, in the school books, so that they know the true history of the freedom movement.
Thank you. Thank you, Jana. Good presentation to everybody. Thank you. Mufta Saab, Chima Saab, or Samara Saab. Thank you.